The ozone disco tragedy, known as the worst fire tragedy in the Philippines. 162 perished from the accident and 95 were left injured. Indeed, death sometimes comes unexpectedly, and when it does, it leaves some spirits restless.
Maraming mga nagpaparamdam sa ozone site mismo. And then aside from that, families are really bothered about their loved ones kasi nagpaparamdam daw sa kanila and everything. So we seek the help of Tony Perez, the spirit questors from Ateneo. And one night, March of 1997, we went inside the ozone disco at 12 midnight. And we lighted candles, we formed circles, and doon, kinausap nila yung mga spirits doon. Kasi may isang victim doon sa ozone na umalis lang pala na hindi nagpapaalam sa mother. Nagpunta sa ozone disco, kasama yung grupo, hindi nagpaalam. One help that Tony gave us pa is, since nangyari nga yung tragedy, siya mang-missing namin. Kasi nagkapalit-palit yung mga katawan nila na ibigay sa ibang pamilya, ibang katawan. And Tony helped a lot in identifying the missing victims.
After the session with the mediums, the eerie occurrences in the area lessened. I see dead people. This was the famous line from the movie The Sixth Sense, a film where a child communicated with spirits. Many people are wont to accept this as an example of art imitating life. But can we make life imitate art? Welcome to a special edition of Chances Are. Tonight, we've invited a spirit medium to help members of the audience communicate with their departed loved ones. Will she hear voices from the grave? Will she see dead people? Chances are, anything is possible. Mediums are people who have the ability to see and communicate with different spirit entities, including the departed. And they facilitate communication between the spirits and the intended recipients of their messages. Professor Felipe Jocano, an emeritus professor in the University of the Philippines, says mediums have existed since the early days.
Impression-wise, it is looking beyond the normal things of appearances of things. In popular parlance, they call it the third eye, Some people are gifted with that. These are belief systems prevalent in the surrounding culture.
Daisy Mercader discovered her gift by accident a few years back. She claims that her daughter was the one who began to see things at first.
I'm trying to look for a good psychiatrist for her. So, dito kami napunta. Isang malayong kamag-anak ko biglang nagsabi sa akin na bago ko patingnan sa doktor yung anak ko, patingnan ko muna sa isa ring psychic. Siyempre, may pagka-skeptical ako noon kasi nakapokus ako sa trabaho lang, sa normal na buhay. Sinasabi nila abnormal daw yung may mga psychic ability kasi. So, pinag-aralan kong mabuti pati science of the mind, lahat. Pero till na-discover ko na ako pala yung may kakayahan pagkabata pa.
The first few encounters were a bit frightening for Daisy, and she wasn't sure if she could handle her extraordinary ability.
Actually, the first time na nangyari natakot ako kasi nung naka-experience ako na talking with the dead person is natakot ako noon kasi isang buwan talaga akong hindi nakatulog mag-isa sa kwarto nang walang ilaw. Then natutunan ko unang-una kung paano siya gamitin, kung kailan lang siya gagamitin.
Daisy Mercader is an intuitive counselor and a clairvoyant. As an intuitive counselor, she regularly holds seminars on self-empowerment and team building. As a medium, however, her talks are not always limited to the living. Daisy, thank you for joining us on Chances Are. It's a pleasure. Earlier, you stated that you actually began this journey as a skeptic or as someone who wasn't so well versed in this realm. And you went on to study and investigate on your own. Saan yung turning point for you? Where did you go from a skeptic to a practitioner or a believer?
I recall yung mga experience ko na may experience pala ako na talking with a dead person na hindi ko alam na patay na pala siya.
Can you describe that experience?
Yung tao na yon, brother lang siya ng classmate ko. Then we are not close, just met him twice, just saying hi and hello. So wala kaming communication before. So just one time na papasok ako sa office ko, just walking distance from my house, I saw him. Naglalakad siya across the street. Then, nag-smile siya sa akin na hindi naman usual nangyayari pag nakikita kami. Then, he actually, sinabi niya kung anong aksidente yung pinanggalingan niya, kung anong nangyari sa kanya, except na sinabi niya napatay na pala siya.
Pwede mo bang i-describe what happens when you communicate with unseen entities, with forces that we don't usually physically are able to see or touch?
Sometimes it's like while we're talking. Sometimes it's solid, just like yung experience ko nga nung while I'm talking with less than 30 minutes conversation with the dead person. So, talagang tao siya eh.
Okay.
Pati suot niya nung namatay siya, yun. So, sometimes it's like yung parang Casper siya. Na minsan hindi ko ma-explain kung anong color niya kasi it's light, parang light gray na merong parang yung ash. Para siyang ganon. Sometimes pag kausap ko siya, nakatayo lang sila dyan. Minsan, siya, madilim. Minsan, damit lang nakikita ko. Na tinatanong ko, anong kailangan mo? Bakit ka nandyan? So, minsan parang nawawala na lang sila. Sometimes, parang I'm watching a movie in the screen. Sometimes, nakikita ko sila sa dreams.
Okay.
And sometimes, may mga taong parang nakita ko na pero hindi ko pa naman sila namimit before. So, parang minsan ganon yung experience ko. So, doon ako natatakot kasi when I can identify the spirit or the energy ng taong patay at saka ng taong buhay. So, minsan mas malakas yung energy or spirit ng taong buhay.
How do you feel about it? Meron pa bang takot? Do you still feel uncomfortable with the communication? Are you
With the
comfortable
dead
with it now? Yes.
or the unseen? Sometimes, nakakaramdam din ako ng takot. Alam mo yung pag sobrang walang hangin, no? Tapos may makikita kang mga taong nakatayo dyan sa harapan mo. Pero hindi mo nakikita yung mga mukha.
For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And for every medium, there is a belligerent and disapproving skeptic. Like any paranormal phenomena, communicating with the dead is a concept that draws different reactions from people. Mediums are either seen as a link to the afterlife, a last chance for closure, a mental manipulator who capitalizes on generalization and suggestion, or a downright and ludicrous fraud.
Dr. Ali Gee, a clinical psychologist, explains how mediums probably come up with the answers to questions regarding a dead relative. One possibility is mind reading.
Mind reading, yun kung may kausap ka, you try to think, tingnan mo yung kanyang ways, 'di ba? Sometimes, alam natin, magagalit na isang tao dahil sa lubong kilay niya. Minsan, naiintindihan natin, natutuwa siya sa sinasabi natin dahil nakasmile siya. So, mind reading is actually, as I've said, it's like mind mapping another individual's thoughts, feelings, and actions.
But Dr. Ali doesn't discount the fact that there is a study in psychology that might explain this method: mentalism. It discusses the capability of a person to practice telekinesis, telepathy, precognition, and ESP, or extrasensory perception.
Telekinesis is knowing, di ba? What the other people is thinking. ESP is knowing what's going to happen. Telepathy is sending your thoughts or reading the thoughts of other people. And precognition is knowing what's going to happen in the future.
There are actual branches in psychology which tackles the manner in which mediums talk to the dead, namely clairvoyance, or seeing the spirits, clairaudience, or hearing but not seeing spirits, and clairsentience, in which a medium can only feel the spirit.
Parapsychology is a branch of science wherein they try to explain and understand yung mga abnormal mga happenings, mga life after death, mga speaking to the dead. Pero still, it's a science, you know, trying to explain that and accepting it, hindi pa din ganun ka-accepted because it's still being disputed on.
The feeling of desperation and search of closure may be the most influential factor which drives a person to put his hopes in a medium, especially those who experience an untimely death of a loved one.
Kasi sometimes because of our, feeling of unresolved issues, nandiyan yung feeling na gustong-gusto makausap natin yung ating dearly departed ones. Maaari, dahil namatay, mayroong mga issues hindi pa tapos, hindi nasabi, di ba? Hindi na clear. We tend to go to someone who claim to be a medium. Tapos yung medium, sa dami ng sinabi natin, kaya na niya i-weave ang isang buong storya. That is why it's very, very careful we should be very, very careful when we look for a medium.
The Catholic Church, however, has a firm stand with regards to mediums, or communicating with the dead. Father Nicolas Salamanca, a parish priest in San Isidro Labrador Quasi-Parish, shares that it is much better to just pray for the dearly departed in order to help them to enter heaven.
There are reports that people are communicating with the dead. But as to the Church point of view, it does not speak about that possibility of speaking with the dead or talking with the dead. As the soul is being purified, being cleansed from all the sins, really expect from the living their prayers, because the prayers can help them a lot, especially the prayer in the Eucharist.
The Church does not encourage talking with the dead because it could have a treacherous side.
There were instances wherein the devil assumed the role of the soul. It can be used by the devil, especially this medium, this clairvoyance. That's why they have to be careful when they communicate with the dead.
Dead men tell tales. Their stories are usually told by the evidence left behind by the incident. But many of us believe that we can cross over from the physical world into the spiritual world and be reunited with the dead. Guest psychic Daisy Mercader has agreed to help our audience members connect with their dearly departed loved ones.
Clairvoyants or mediums possess abilities that are difficult to explain. Some branches of science acknowledge that some people do have extreme levels of perception and that they can see beyond what ordinary individuals can. Allegedly, part of what they can also sense are spirits. Are these capabilities simply physical in nature, or are they gifts from other realms? In our attempt to measure these powers, medium Daisy Mercader agreed to undergo scientific observation. Since perception is a capacity of the brain, our experiment will try to see any difference between a clairvoyant's brain activity and a normal individual. There are several tests and experiments to gauge how a person's brain works. One is the electroencephalography, or what we call EEG. The EEG records electrical activity along the scalp produced by the firing of neurons within the brain. In clinical contexts, EEG refers to the recording of the brain's spontaneous electrical activity over a short period of time, usually 20 to 40 minutes, as recorded from multiple electrodes placed upon the scalp. The EEG measures a person's alpha and beta frequencies. The normal alpha frequency is at 8 to 12 Hz. This is brought out by closing the eyes and relaxation. While the normal beta frequency is at about 12 to 30 Hz and is often associated with active, busy, or anxious thinking and active concentration. The team decided to do an EEG test to determine if there are any differences between a normal person's brain waves compared to that of the mediums.
Yeah, it's normal naman. Wala naman ako nakitang ibang findings or abnormalities dun sa tracing.
To further gauge any irregularity in the medium's brain waves, we asked her if there were any spirits around and if she could communicate with them.
Meron din ditong bata na may ikot-ikot siya, parang siguro nasagasaan, pero sa dami ng nagbigay ng ilaw, maraming nakaalis dito. Hindi sila nanggugulo.
During nung conversation niya, may napansin lang akong kakaiba kasi usually ano siya ang pattern niya would be like sa straight waveforms. So yung kay Ma'am Daisy, medyo nag-sway siya. And there was an unusual swaying of the waveforms. Yun lang.
But does this change in brainwave pattern prove the clairvoyant's ability to communicate with the dead? We brought the results to neurologist Dr. Greg Dairit to explain the readings on the EEG.
Normally in the EEG, what you see on the left must be also seen on the right. The left is more of the dominant part of the brain in majority of individuals. It is the one responsible, one for memory, number 2 for speech, and number 3 for some of the functions like motor sensory. Okay, yung pakiramdam and the strength of the individual on the opposite side. Yun ang left dominant side. Yung right side is the one associated with abstract thinking, constructional activities of an individual, yung sometimes yung musical talent. It's a combination of left and right, no? So probably those individuals who are clairvoyant probably have a more developed occipital lobe, which is the one for processing vision, and connection to the temporal parietal lobes of the brain, no? Because these are the ones that is responsible for making all this that are seen by the person to be processed.
But is there any difference between the brain waves of a normal person compared to a clairvoyant's?
I don't see any reason why a normal individual will have a different brain activity from a medium individual, no?
But how can Dr. Dairit explain the sudden change of patterns described by the EEG technician?
Meron lang ako napansin, some pages showed somewhat dysynchrony in some of the waves in the frontal parietal cortex. So if I may attribute this during the time that probably the medium is doing some forms of concentration.
Does this prove the medium's capacity to perform paranormal activities?
It's difficult, no, based on this EEG tracing, that the minor changes that I saw cannot be really deduced as the one responsible during the channeling stage, no. So as I've told you, some of these we call paranormal activities that are happening in a brain of a person cannot be explained sometimes by diagnostic tests like this.
In this episode of Chances Are, we gathered a group of people who were all left behind by a loved one, a husband, a father, a brother-in-law. They all believed that their departed loved ones feel troubled and restless because of their sudden demise. And to help the spirits find closure, their relatives are willing to seek the help of our medium, Daisy Mercader. Members of the audience were carefully chosen. Housewives Rizalina Reyes, Francesca Flores, and Ella Villanueva are here to inquire about their late partners, while Edith Aguirre and Jenny Luz Santos Pabale are also present to try and communicate with their departed. Their cases will not be disclosed to Daisy. It's up to her to ask the spirits and find out who died, the cause of their death, and the message they have for their loved ones. So as not to affect or put any strain on Daisy, we intentionally did not inform her that a mind-reading expert and psychologist, Dr. Ali Gee, is present to observe the session.
I came really with an open mind to see what is happening and to feel and to observe. And, you know, things like this is a branch of science that is up to now is still being disputed. So I really came with an open mind.
Also in attendance is pastor and theologian Bong Manayon, who is doubtful whether or not mediums can actually talk to the spirits of the dead.
The burden of unfinished business makes it difficult to accept death and cope with the loss of a loved one. This is true apparently not just for those who get left behind, but also for those who have departed. Members of our audience are here tonight to have a second chance to finish what needs to be finished. Others are here simply to check on how their loved ones are doing in the afterlife. Will Daisy be able to help them? We find out. Daisy, this is Miss Edith Aguirre, and she's here to ask for your help tonight. I'm going to leave you to it.
Edith's brother-in-law committed suicide, and she wants to find out what's behind this mournful act.
Yung soul ng brother nyo is, alam niyo yung nakatayo siya dyan, tapos naka-side view siya, nakatingin siya dito, nakangiti siya, pero parang may nakasangga na parang puno or like yung bench na yon. Ang palatandaan ko po doon, kapag hindi siya malinaw na nakaharap sa akin ng ganyan, yung pangyayari ng pagkamatay niya, meron siyang hindi gustong ipaalam.
Edith unintentionally revealed details about the death. Thus, Daisy is left with channeling the message of the departed.
Ang masasabi ko sa pagpapakita niya is at peace siya. Ginusto niya yung nangyari sa kanya, yung ginawa niya. So, wag po daw kayong mag-alala. Actually, kayo ang hindi nakaka-let go sa kanya.
Naramdaman ko na may peace of mind na kami, all members of the family. Kasi sasabihin ko sa kanila, tapos at least happy siya sa itaas, sa kabilang buhay.
She really wanted to be able to communicate with her dearly departed one. So nandiyan na yun kanyang mindset that I'm going to communicate. So anything said, anything done, will trigger already na na-meet yung kanyang needs. May longing doon So the longing was met.
Miss Daisy, this is Miss Francesca Flores, and she also has some questions for you. I'll leave you to it.
This time, Daisy is completely unaware of Francesca's case.
Actually, ngayon po is masaya na siya sa buhay niya. Ngayon po, kung naniniwala po kayo sa mga reincarnation, baka po yung mga susunod niyong apo is makikita niyo ang mukha ng inyong may bahay.
Talaga?
Apo.
Ano po yung dahilan na nawala po si Miss?
Na-stroke po.
Na-stroke po.
Daisy correctly identified the deceased and confirmed his presence in the room.
Madilim po yung kanyang spirit. Ibig sabihin po nun, totally naka-cross over ho siya.
Kasi ikaw, wala ka nang partner, magsaya ka na lang.
Rizalina Reyes, Miss Daisy, I'll leave you to it.
Rizalina Reyes followed right after. And the spirit's message?
Nandito siya pero malungkot siya. Hindi pa siya nakakaakyat. Pero sabi niya, wag kayong mag-alala kasi nandyan pa siya parang gusto pa niya dito.
Rizalina's husband is still not ready to cross over. And in the course of the session, other issues were allegedly revealed by the spirit of the deceased.
Ma'am, marami kayong hindi na gampanan sa kanya na maring nagkulang tayo. Pero hindi po ibig sabihin nun, hindi niya tayo mapapatawad. Kasi po pagka namatay ang isang tao, wala na po yung feelings ng in-between
And to further convince Rizalina, Daisy also confirmed the presence of a spirit.
Ang itsura po niya, naka-side view siya, nakabarong Tagalog siya. So, medyo mapilyo siyang ngumiti. Huwag niyo sabihin sa akin ngayon, hindi niyo siya hinahanap-hanap.
Ay, labot niya.
So, kasi kunan niya siya sa likuran ninyo. Naka-side view nga lang po siya, pero yun lang po hinihiling niya, ilaw. Siya po ang humiling eh.
Okay na rin naman sa akin yun eh. At least nalaman ko rin na baka nga may pagkukulang ako, kaya medyo may tampo, medyo ano, nalaman ko tuloy, di ba? Di, pagdarasal ko pa rin siya hanggang ngayon.
Okay na po, Ma'am Rizalina?
Thank you po.
Dito po tayo. Daisy, we have another audience member who has some questions that need to be answered. This is Miss Ella Villanueva.
Okay. Good evening po. Meron pa kayong concern or immediate question? Malalim ang naging mga problema niya sa buhay. Hindi po kasi kayo nag-uusap bilang mag-asawa, kaya hindi niyo po nalaman kung ano ang kanyang mga suliranin sa buhay. So, sa buong pagsasama po ninyo, ilang beses nyo lang po masasabi kung kailan kayo huling nag-usap?
May kinikimkim nga daw na pati nga rin yung pagsasama namin na hindi naman totoo yung sinasabi niya.
Minsan yung denials lang nila na meron silang hindi naiintindihan sa sitwasyon na may connection sa buhay nilang nangyayari. Kaya minsan parang, hindi ako naniniwala dyan.
And last, Jenny Pabale.
Kita sa baba kanina. Okay. Meron kang bit-bit na dalawa. Okay. Isang bata, isang siguro mga older, hindi naman masyadong matanda. Okay. Maybe yung bata is one of your guide.
Is there someone here who has a message for me? And then hindi niya matukoy sa akin kung sino.
This one is so quiet. Pero bumaba din siya kasi para mapagbigyan siguro yung mga tao dito.
Was the spirit shy? Or was it because Jenny is quite a skeptic?
May blockage ka sa energy mo. Parang baka mamaya pag uwi mo sabihin sa'yo ng spirit, bakit ako makikipag-usap sa'yo, maniniwala ka ba?
Gusto ko siyang i-correct na hindi ako skeptic na tao. Ako yung type ng tao na madaling maniwala. Kaya nga, hindi ako pupunta dito na kung hindi ako naniniwala na masasagot niya yung tanong ko.
After the session, some were convinced, some are still undecided, and one believer started to have doubts.
Kanina talagang umasa ako na yun yung may sasagot niya sa akin na give up ko na siya, na peace na siya, at peace na siya. Pero wala. Then, sinatanong ko rin kung sino yun, hindi niya masabi sa akin.
And the skeptic remains skeptical.
But Roman Catholic Catechism says that even if it was for the good, you shouldn't do it. And hindi natin hahayaan yung dahil nangyari, pwede. Meron tayong, sabihin natin, anchor, meron tayong takdanan, dito tayo gagalaw. Hindi na lagay sa katekismo o sa Bible yon kung walang dahilan yon. And I think there are demonic consequences if you try to dabble in this matter.
But he doesn't deny the fact that Daisy's ability might have faltered due to the circumstances.
Part ng observation ko nga, disjointed yung procedure kasi Daisy was put on the spot na kailangan may sabihin siya all the time. And I think part of the time, the information was not complete. Pero dapat may sabihin pa rin siya.
But for Daisy, she saw what she saw. Some appeared vividly, some in the form of a shadow. Each, she says, is carrying a message for their loved ones who are longing for closure and peace of mind.
All right, Daisy, thank you. We've covered a lot of ground, we've answered a lot of questions, but there's still a few questions that need to be answered, and we'll be answering all of those when Chances Are returns. Grief is part of our humanity, and death is part of our reality. An emotion and an experience that we're all scared of and that we'd all rather avoid. But does it help us to know that we haven't really lost our departed and that death is not the end? Or is it?
Death is inevitable. It is said to be the end of a person's earthbound existence. People mourn for their loss. The thought of being separated from a loved one for the rest of their life is enough reason to lament. Many of us fear death, but we find comfort in the thought that the souls of those who have died live forever in the afterlife, and that someday we will all be together again. Death comes to us, whether we like it or not, and the world doesn't stop turning. So even during grief, we struggle to move forward. For some, they take it one day at a time. But there are also some who find closure in knowing that their loved one is happy in the afterlife. This is how Rizalina feels after Daisy has communicated with her late husband.
Papasalamat naman ako, masaya ako. Narinig ko rin yung kung nasaan siya, kung naandito pa siya sa baba o kung wala na. O kung ano man yung mga pagkukulang, edi saka ko ipagpapatuloy, pagdarasal ko pa rin siya hanggang ngayon.
Prayer is the food of the soul, she believes, and she is not only praying for her departed loved one, but also for the strength to go on living.
Ngayon, okay na. Masaya na ako. Hindi na ako nag-aalala na dati kasi magagalit siya kung maalis ako. Eh ngayon, enjoy na ako sa buhay ko na nakakapagsayaw ako.
Although parapsychology is still doing further studies with regards to clairvoyance, telepathy, and channeling the message of spirits through mediums, some very important segments in our society also seek their help. Forensic departments have benefited from the assistance of mediums, which have led to cases being solved.
It helped, yeah. Acceptance-wise, closure, kasi kahit papaano, kasi biglaan di ba? Yung hindi sila nakapagpaalam ng maayos sa mga mahal nila sa buhay. So, because of that medium, of that event, kahit papaano na nabawasan o naibsan yung sadness, yung kalungkutan ng mga pamilya.
But psychologist Ali Gee warns that there are some who might take advantage of our grief and our desperate quest to find closure and justice.
Kung dinadaan natin lahat sa damdamin natin at di natin isipin ng maayos ito, malamang talaga maloloko din tayo. Can be someone who is skillful in mind reading lang, makukuha na lahat ng gusto mo, di ba? Masasabi na lahat ng gusto mo kasi narinig na niya kanina na pinagsasabi mo, di ba?
But religion, other belief systems, and even science agree in saying that there are still realms of our existence which even the brightest of minds cannot fully explain or understand.
I believe some people have that gift to really connect and communicate with the dead. I really believe there are some people who have that gift. But that is a gift that is only for a few, hindi para sa lahat.
For Daisy, she believes that it is a gift. The voices of the souls who want to be heard are not easy to ignore.
Actually, yung feeling ko, ang sarap ng pakiramdam pag nangyari, ginawa nila yung advice, tapos nag-benefit sila ng maganda, magte-text sa'yo ng, "Ma'am, maraming salamat, ginawa ko po yung advice, and then effective po, ganito, ganyan." So, ang sarap ng pakiramdam makatulong.
There is no tangible proof that some people have the gift of communicating with the dead. But there's also no quantifiable data that can prove that billions of galaxies exist in space. But one thing we know for sure, Earth is not the only planet. Just because it doesn't exist in our world does not necessarily mean it doesn't exist at all.
There are many sides to a story. And people have their own versions of reality. When something remarkable happens, people's interpretations will always vary. Because in the grand scheme of things, chances are, anything is possible.